A flawless gemstone should always be worth more than one filled with visible flaws. At least, that's what most people believe. Yet inside museums, elite collections, and the world's biggest gemstone auctions, experts often reach for the imperfect stone first. Why? Because the tiny fractures, hidden inclusions, and natural patterns that most buyers reject can reveal something far more valuable than flawless beauty. Once you learn what they see, you'll never look at another gemstone the same way again. It all begins in Africa, where one extraordinary crystal quietly proved that perfection was never the highest standard in the gemstone world. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Number 15. Mozambique Paraíba-Type Tourmaline. Two gemstones can sit side by side under the same display lights. One appears almost flawless, crystal clear, free of visible inclusions, polished to perfection. The other reveals tiny internal features, faint fractures, and natural growth marks hidden beneath its surface. Most people choose the first stone without hesitation. Many professional collectors choose the second. That decision seems impossible until the moment the hidden evidence inside the crystal becomes more valuable than the perfection everyone notices first. Few gemstones demonstrate this better than the copper-bearing Paraíba-type tourmalines discovered in Mozambique. At first glance, these remarkable crystals seem to contradict everything conventional jewelry advertising has taught for decades. They are not always perfectly clean. Under magnification, many reveal minute inclusions, delicate growth structures, or subtle internal characteristics that would immediately catch the attention of a trained gemologist. Yet none of those features explains why demand remains extraordinary. The real prize is the color. During the gemstone's formation, trace amounts of copper became incorporated into its crystal structure under exceptionally uncommon geological conditions. The result is an electric blue to green glow so vivid that it appears almost illuminated from within. That color is extraordinarily difficult for nature to produce and remains the feature collectors pursue above all else. This is where the definition of a flaw begins to unravel. In many gemstones, clarity dominates the conversation. In exceptional Mozambique Paraíba-type tourmalines, however, the rare geological conditions responsible for the color often matter far more than the presence of minor natural inclusions. Those tiny internal features are not automatically desirable, but neither do they necessarily diminish the appeal of a stone whose color represents an exceptionally rare natural event. To a scientist, they are clues. To a gemologist, they are evidence. To an experienced collector, they help confirm that the beauty being admired was shaped by nature rather than manufactured to imitate it. That single realization changes the way every gemstone in this documentary should be viewed. Perhaps perfection has never been the highest standard. Perhaps authenticity has. And if subtle internal features can strengthen confidence instead of weakening it, the next African gemstone reveals an even more surprising truth. In Zambia's legendary emerald deposits, collectors actively search for internal gardens that many first-time buyers would mistakenly reject as imperfections. Number 14. Zambian Emerald. The microscope clicks into focus. For a brief moment, the brilliant green disappears. Instead of seeing a polished gemstone, the viewer is suddenly staring into a maze of tiny crystals, feather-like fractures, microscopic liquid pockets, and delicate mineral threads suspended inside the emerald. To someone unfamiliar with gemology, the image looks almost disappointing. To a professional, it is exactly what they hope to find. This hidden landscape has fascinated gemologists for generations because it reveals something that no polished surface ever can: identity. Zambia has become one of the world's most respected sources of emeralds, producing crystals celebrated for their rich green color and remarkable transparency. Yet among experts, the discussion rarely ends with color alone. The conversation quickly moves beneath the surface, where every natural emerald preserves a complex internal world known collectively as jardin, French for garden. The name could not be more appropriate. Some inclusions resemble moss. Others branch like frozen roots. Tiny mineral crystals appear scattered like seeds across invisible landscapes, while microscopic fluid-filled cavities remain trapped exactly where they formed millions of years ago during the crystal's slow growth deep within ancient metamorphic rocks. These features are not decorations. They are geological records. Each one documents the extraordinary conditions under which the emerald formed, recording changes in pressure, temperature, chemistry, and surrounding minerals long before the first forests covered the continents. Ironically, the cleaner an emerald appears, the more carefully experts often examine it, not because clarity is undesirable, but because genuine natural emeralds almost always preserve some trace of their geological journey. Those natural signatures help distinguish an earth-created crystal from laboratory-grown material that may appear visually perfect while lacking the intricate history written inside natural stone. This subtle distinction separates admiration from understanding. Anyone can appreciate a beautiful emerald. Recognizing why its internal landscape matters requires learning to read nature's handwriting rather than simply admiring nature's artwork. Perhaps that is the first real lesson hidden inside this documentary. Beauty captures attention. Evidence earns trust. And once every natural signature begins to feel like part of the gemstone instead of a flaw, it becomes impossible to ignore another remarkable question. What happens when nature abandons consistency altogether and creates a gemstone that will never share its visual identity with any other crystal on Earth? Number 13. Ethiopian Precious Opal. There is a curious moment that occurs only with a handful of gemstones. A collector lifts the stone slightly. Without warning, an entirely new landscape appears. The deep green that dominated only a second ago suddenly dissolves into flashes of crimson, cobalt blue, molten gold, and violet. Tilt the stone again and the entire scene disappears, replaced by a pattern that has never existed before and will never appear in exactly the same way again. Nothing inside the gemstone has changed, only the angle of light. Among Africa's most extraordinary treasures, Ethiopian precious opal has elevated this phenomenon into an art form created entirely by geology. Unlike crystalline gemstones whose beauty depends on transparency or flawless surfaces, precious opal owes its reputation to an internal architecture so intricate that it remains one of nature's most remarkable optical achievements. Millions upon millions of microscopic silica spheres became arranged inside the stone over immense geological timescales. Their size, spacing, and organization determine how incoming light is broken apart and returned to the eye as shifting spectral colors. Even the slightest variation during that ancient formation process changes the final result forever. That is why no laboratory, no cutting workshop, and no master craftsman can promise to reproduce the exact visual identity of another exceptional opal. Collectors understand this instinctively. The search is rarely for the brightest specimen. It is for a pattern that has never been seen before. Some stones resemble lightning crossing a midnight sky. Others reveal floating islands of emerald surrounded by rivers of fire. Certain museum-quality specimens display intricate honeycomb mosaics that seem almost too symmetrical to have formed naturally, while others scatter countless tiny sparks across their surface like distant galaxies. Each pattern exists only because countless microscopic imperfections accumulated differently inside the stone. Remove those tiny irregularities, and the personality disappears with them. This is where the meaning of value quietly changes again. Individuality cannot be mass-produced. It cannot be standardized. It cannot even be repeated by nature itself. Perhaps the rarest luxury has never been perfection. Perhaps it has always been originality. But if light alone can completely transform the identity of a gemstone, what happens when the gemstone itself appears to change color simply because the observer takes a single step to one side? Number 12. Tanzanite. Every object in nature has a color. At least that is what human perception has always suggested. Tanzanite quietly challenges that assumption. Hold an exceptional crystal perfectly still under controlled lighting, and something remarkable begins to happen. Without altering the gemstone itself, even a slight change in viewing angle can transform what the eye perceives. Deep sapphire blue gradually gives way to rich violet. Rotate the crystal again, and flashes of burgundy begin to emerge from within the same stone. Nothing has changed inside the gem. Nothing has been added. Nothing has disappeared. The only thing that moved was the observer. This extraordinary optical behavior is known as pleochroism, one of the defining characteristics that makes Tanzanian Tanzanite unlike almost any other gemstone used in fine jewelry. Its origin lies within an exceptionally rare geological setting near the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro, where unusual tectonic conditions created a variety of the mineral zoisite capable of displaying different colors along different crystallographic directions. During cutting, master lapidaries spend countless hours studying the crystal before making a single cut, because rotating the rough by only a few degrees can dramatically change the color that ultimately dominates the finished gemstone. Suddenly, perfection becomes a far more complicated idea. Is the correct color blue? Is it violet? Or is the gemstone's true identity found only in its ability to be all of them at once? Collectors rarely describe outstanding Tanzanite as a stone with one perfect appearance. Instead, they admire its complexity, its willingness to reveal different personalities depending on light, orientation, and perspective. Perhaps that explains why the finest specimens continue to fascinate long after the first impression fades. Every movement uncovers another layer that had been hidden only moments before, rewarding observation instead of instant judgment. The lesson reaches well beyond gemology. Some of nature's greatest creations cannot be understood from a single point of view. They demand patience, they reward curiosity, and they remind us that certainty often disappears the closer we look. The next African gemstone takes that idea even further, not by changing with light, but by preserving the physical scars of unimaginable pressure, proving that what appears damaged today may actually be the strongest evidence that the crystal survived an extraordinary journey deep within the earth. Number 11. Mozambique ruby. Long before a ruby reflected its first beam of light, it endured forces capable of destroying it. Deep beneath what is now northern Mozambique, ancient rocks were caught in immense tectonic collisions that generated extraordinary heat and pressure over millions of years. Minerals recrystallized, mountain belts rose and eroded, entire geological environments disappeared. Within that violent history, tiny ruby crystals slowly began to grow. Their journey, however, was anything but peaceful. As the crystals expanded, changing pressure fractured their interiors. Mineral-rich fluids seeped into microscopic cracks. Heat returned. The fractures partially healed. Growth resumed. More stress followed, leaving behind another generation of internal features. Each stage remained preserved inside the crystal. Modern gemologists recognize many of these structures as fingerprint inclusions, healed fissures, and delicate rudal silk, features that reveal a remarkably complex geological life rather than a single, uninterrupted moment of crystal growth. To an untrained eye, these marks may appear to be damage. In reality, many are evidence that the ruby survived conditions severe enough to destroy less stable crystals long before they ever reached the Earth's surface. That distinction changes the way experienced collectors evaluate exceptional natural rubies. The goal is not to find a stone that has experienced nothing. The goal is to find one that experienced everything and still emerged with extraordinary color, durability, and beauty. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of gemology. Perfect appearance can suggest simplicity. Natural complexity often suggests resilience. Every healed fracture represents a moment when the crystal could have been lost forever. Yet geological processes allowed it to continue growing instead of breaking apart completely. Rather than erasing its past, nature incorporated that history into the ruby itself. Collectors are not simply admiring a beautiful red gemstone. They are examining the physical record of survival written inside it. Perhaps that explains why certain natural characteristics inspire fascination instead of disappointment. Not because they are flawless, but because they prove the gemstone overcame conditions that seemed impossible to endure. Some gemstones reveal their history through color. Others preserve it through intricate internal landscapes. The next remarkable African discovery tells its story in an entirely different language, one so subtle that most people never notice it, yet it is often the very first feature an experienced gemologist searches for under magnification. Number 10. Nigerian sapphire. A practiced gemologist rarely studies a sapphire the way most people do. Before admiring its brilliance, before commenting on its color, before estimating its value, the gemstone is quietly rotated beneath a focused beam of light. For a few seconds, nothing seems to happen. Then almost invisible threads begin to appear inside the crystal. Those delicate lines are among the first clues an expert hopes to discover. Known as rutile silk, these microscopic needle-like inclusions formed naturally while the sapphire was growing deep within the earth. Locked inside the crystal millions of years ago, they preserve evidence of temperature, pressure, and chemical conditions that no polishing wheel can erase and no marketing campaign can imitate. Some Nigerian sapphires display remarkably fine examples of these natural structures. To the average buyer, they may seem insignificant. To a trained eye, they answer questions that outward beauty never could. Was the stone created naturally? Has it been subjected to high-temperature treatment? Did it experience a geological environment capable of producing this particular crystal? Sometimes a network of tiny needles can reveal more than a flawless surface ever will. This is one of the quiet differences between admiration and expertise. Admiration begins with appearance. Expertise begins with evidence. That distinction explains why gemologists often spend more time examining the interior of a gemstone than its polished exterior. Every inclusion becomes part of an investigation. Every microscopic feature narrows the possibilities until the crystal begins revealing its own history. Ironically, the most important information inside a sapphire is often invisible to anyone unwilling to slow down. Collectors understand this instinctively. They know remarkable gemstones are not appreciated in a single glance. They are interpreted. Much like an archaeologist carefully uncovers fragments of an ancient civilization, a gemologist reconstructs the life of a crystal from details so small that most observers never notice them at all. Knowledge in this world does not replace beauty. It explains why beauty exists in the first place. And once the smallest hidden details become impossible to ignore, another African gemstone quietly overturns a different assumption altogether. Some of the rarest treasures on Earth never announce themselves with spectacular color or dramatic brilliance. They remain overlooked simply because almost no one knows what they are truly looking at. Number 9. Tsavorite garnet. Walk through almost any jewelry store, and the same names appear again and again. Diamond, ruby, emerald, sapphire. Those four gemstones have dominated public attention for generations, becoming so familiar that many people unconsciously assume they must also represent the highest levels of rarity. They do not. Hidden within the gemstone world are remarkable minerals that receive only a fraction of the recognition, despite existing in far more limited geological circumstances. Tsavorite garnet is one of them. Discovered in the late 1960s near the border of Kenya and Tanzania, this vivid green variety of grossular garnet entered the jewelry market without centuries of royal tradition or powerful advertising campaigns behind it. Unlike emerald, whose reputation had already been established across civilizations, Tsavorite had to earn respect through its own geological merit. And that is exactly what it did. Its brilliant green color is created naturally by traces of vanadium and chromium. Yet unlike many emeralds, fine Tsavorite often displays exceptional transparency without requiring routine clarity enhancement. Even more remarkable is the extraordinary combination of geological conditions required for its formation. The precise balance of chemistry, pressure, and metamorphic processes responsible for producing gem-quality Tsavorite occurs in only a handful of locations, making significant discoveries exceptionally uncommon. Paradoxically, this rarity has never guaranteed widespread fame. Recognition and rarity have never been the same thing. Experienced collectors understand this better than anyone. They know that markets often reward familiarity first and knowledge later. A gemstone can remain largely unknown to the public, while quietly becoming one of the most respected additions to advanced collections. In that sense, Tsavorite represents something far more valuable than an attractive green crystal. It represents the reward for looking beyond reputation. Perhaps this explains why seasoned collectors spend so much time studying what most people overlook. Prestige can be inherited. True discovery cannot. Some of the Earth's greatest treasures wait in plain sight, not because they are hidden, but because almost nobody has learned their names. And if rarity can remain invisible simply because of unfamiliarity, another African gemstone reveals a different kind of hidden world altogether. Its greatest wonder cannot be appreciated from the surface, because the most extraordinary landscape exists entirely within the crystal itself. Number 8. Namibian Aquamarine. Some gemstones reveal everything within a single glance. Others seem almost reluctant to give away their secrets. Namibian Aquamarine belongs to the second group. Its cool blue transparency creates the illusion of simplicity, inviting the eye to believe there is nothing left to discover beneath the polished surface. But the longer the crystal is observed, the more that first impression begins to dissolve. Tiny liquid-filled cavities suddenly catch the light. Slender mineral needles appear suspended deep inside the crystal. Microscopic channels, invisible only moments earlier, quietly emerge like hidden passages inside an ancient structure. None of these features were placed there by accident. Each one was sealed into the growing crystal, while mineral-rich fluids circulated through fractures beneath the Earth's surface millions of years ago. As the beryl crystal slowly expanded, fragments of that ancient environment became permanently trapped inside, preserving miniature records of the conditions that shaped its formation. To a gemologist, these are known as fluid inclusions. To a collector, they are something even more fascinating. They are evidence that the gemstone possesses an internal world beyond its outward appearance. This explains why experienced collectors often spend far longer examining a remarkable aquamarine than casual observers expect. The objective is no longer to admire color alone. It is to explore complexity. Every new detail rewards patience. Every hidden feature encourages another look. Unlike a perfectly uniform object that reveals itself almost instantly, a gemstone rich in natural internal character continues unfolding over time. It creates a different relationship with its observer, one built not on immediate spectacle, but on gradual discovery. Perhaps this is why genuine natural gemstones continue captivating people in an age dominated by flawless manufactured materials. Perfection satisfies quickly. Complexity remains interesting. The most memorable treasures are rarely those understood within seconds. They are the ones that continue offering new discoveries years after they first entered a collection. That quiet difference separates decoration from fascination, and nature still has another lesson waiting. Not every extraordinary pattern forms inside a crystal. Sometimes the most beautiful evidence of Earth's history spreads across the surface itself, layer upon layer, recording a chemical journey that no artist could ever design with such precision. Number 7. Congolese Malachite. No sculptor carved the patterns. No artist painted the lines. No designer decided where one band would end and another would begin. Yet across the surface of a fine specimen of Congolese malachite, flowing rings, sweeping waves, and perfectly balanced curves appear with an elegance that seems almost intentional. The remarkable truth is that no one designed any of it. Every pattern emerged naturally as copper-rich groundwater repeatedly entered the same fractures over vast geological timescales. Each pulse deposited another microscopic layer of copper carbonate before retreating, only for the cycle to begin again under slightly different chemical conditions. Millions of repetitions slowly built the mesmerizing concentric bands for which malachite has become famous. Each dark stripe marks a subtle change in chemistry. Each lighter layer records another stage in the mineral's growth. Rather than concealing geological instability, the stone proudly displays it. This is why experienced mineral collectors rarely describe malachite simply as a green gemstone. They describe it as a visible timeline. Unlike transparent crystals that hide much of their history within, malachite places its entire geological journey on display. Every curve documents movement. Every ripple reflects change. Every band exists because the environment refused to remain constant. Paradoxically, that instability is precisely what creates its harmony. Had the surrounding conditions remained perfectly uniform for millions of years, these breathtaking patterns would never have formed at all. Nature achieved beauty not by avoiding change, but by recording it. Perhaps that explains why the human eye lingers so naturally on exceptional malachite. The mind instinctively searches for repetition, yet never finds two bands that are completely identical. Order exists, but it is never mechanical. Complexity exists, but it never becomes random. The result feels strangely familiar, echoing the patterns of tree rings, flowing rivers, ocean currents, and even the spiral growth found throughout the natural world. Collectors recognize something deeper than decoration. They recognize a process. The stone becomes evidence that stability is not always responsible for greatness. Sometimes the most extraordinary creations emerge because the environment kept changing, adapting, and rebuilding itself over and over again. That realization quietly reshapes another assumption. Not every geological masterpiece hides its story beneath the surface. Some carry entire worlds inside, waiting for those patient enough to look beyond the obvious. Number 6. Tanzanian Spinel. Every crystal leaves evidence. The challenge is learning how to read it. Long before a gemstone reaches a display case, a laboratory, or an auction room, it has already documented its own history. Every stage of growth, every interruption, every shift in chemistry, and every episode of geological stress leaves behind subtle clues hidden within the crystal itself. Tanzanian Spinel is exceptionally good at preserving those clues. Unlike gemstones admired primarily for spectacular optical effects, fine Spinel often attracts specialists because of what it quietly remembers. Under magnification, natural crystals can reveal octahedral growth patterns, angular zoning, tiny mineral inclusions, and other structural features that developed as the crystal slowly formed within metamorphic rocks over immense geological timescales. Individually, these details appear insignificant. Together, they become a complete geological record. Much like investigators reconstruct an event from scattered pieces of evidence, gemologists reconstruct the life of a crystal by examining the relationships between these microscopic features. The position of an inclusion, the direction of a growth zone, or the shape of a crystal boundary can reveal information about the environment in which the gemstone formed long before it was ever discovered. This is why experienced professionals rarely describe inclusions simply as imperfections. They describe them as observations. Every observation narrows uncertainty. Every observation increases confidence. In many ways, the gemstone becomes its own witness. Nothing needs to be imagined because the crystal has already preserved the answers inside itself. Perhaps this explains why natural gemstones continue holding a special place in serious collections, despite remarkable advances in laboratory technology. Synthetic crystals may reproduce chemical composition with impressive accuracy, but recreating millions of years of naturally accumulated geological evidence remains an entirely different challenge. The value of a natural gemstone does not exist only in what it is. It also exists in everything it remembers. That realization marks an important turning point. From this moment forward, the search is no longer simply for beauty, rarity, or even authenticity. It becomes a search for history itself, written not in books or museums, but inside minerals that have quietly recorded the Earth's deepest processes long before humanity learned how to read them. And sometimes the most compelling chapter is not hidden within the crystal at all. It unfolds across its surface in patterns so delicate that they seem almost impossible for chemistry alone to have created. Number 5. Namibian Dioptase. Auction catalogs almost never begin with a warning. This one did. Before describing the color, the origin, or even the estimated value, the accompanying notes emphasize something unexpected: extreme fragility. For most luxury objects, that would sound like a disadvantage. For an exceptional specimen of Namibian Dioptase, it can become part of the reason collectors compete to own it. Dioptase possesses one of the most intense emerald green colors found anywhere in the mineral kingdom. At first glance, it seems to promise everything collectors admire: vivid saturation, remarkable brilliance, and striking crystal form. Yet beneath that beauty lies an unforgiving reality. The crystal is surprisingly brittle. A single careless impact can chip a flawless edge. An overly ambitious cut can destroy months of meticulous planning. Even experienced lapidaries approach fine material with unusual caution because the crystal's perfect cleavage makes every decision irreversible. This changes the meaning of rarity. Many gemstones are rare because nature created very few of them. Dioptase is rare for another reason. Nature created them. Time destroyed many of them. Human handling destroyed many more. Only a small number survived both. That survival is what collectors recognize. Every exceptional crystal displayed in a museum or preserved inside a distinguished collection represents a sequence of fortunate events stretching across millions of years. The crystal first had to form under highly unusual geological conditions. It then had to survive tectonic movement, erosion, weathering, mining, transportation, preparation, and decades, sometimes centuries, of careful preservation. Remove any one chapter from that journey, and the specimen never reaches the display case. This explains why experienced collectors often speak of remarkable minerals with a vocabulary that sounds surprisingly different from ordinary buyers. They do not simply ask whether a specimen is beautiful, they ask whether it survived. Perhaps that is one of the quietest lessons hidden inside the world of gemstones. Durability may create abundance. Fragility can create significance. Because every surviving crystal represents countless others that never completed the journey, its value extends far beyond appearance. It becomes evidence that survival itself can be one of nature's rarest achievements. And once survival begins shaping value, another force quietly enters the story: human skill. Some gemstones owe part of their reputation not only to what nature created, but to how extraordinarily difficult they are to preserve without losing what makes them exceptional. Number 4. Zimbabwe Euclase. A single, almost imperceptible sound. Click. For most gemstones, that sound means very little. For Euclase, it can mean the crystal is gone forever. Unlike diamonds, sapphires, or many other familiar gemstones that tolerate the demands of cutting and polishing, Euclase possesses nearly perfect cleavage along specific crystallographic directions. Under the wrong amount of pressure, or even pressure applied from the wrong direction, the crystal can separate with startling precision. There is rarely a second opportunity. This extraordinary characteristic has made fine Euclase one of the most respected challenges in lapidary work. Zimbabwe has produced remarkable specimens admired for their exceptional transparency and delicate blue-green hues. Yet experienced cutters often approach them with unusual restraint. Before the first facet is placed, the crystal may be examined repeatedly under magnification, rotated through every possible orientation, and studied for internal stress that could determine whether months of planning end in success or failure. The cutting itself becomes only part of the achievement. The greater accomplishment is preserving what nature has already created. This changes the relationship between craftsmanship and value. Many luxury objects become desirable because they require skill to produce. Euclase becomes desirable because it demands skill simply to survive the production process. Every finished gemstone represents hundreds of careful decisions that could not be reversed once they were made. Collectors understand this immediately. They are not only admiring the crystal, they are recognizing the discipline required to bring it safely from the earth into a display case without erasing the very qualities that made it extraordinary. In that sense, Euclase reveals an important truth about value. Difficulty often commands respect long before it commands a price. The greater the possibility of failure, the more meaningful every successful result becomes. Perhaps this explains why master lapidaries rarely describe their finest work as acts of control. More often, they describe them as acts of restraint. Knowing when not to force nature can become the highest form of craftsmanship. And that idea leads to an even deeper realization. Even the most gifted artisan cannot recreate what millions of years accomplished naturally. There comes a point where human skill reaches its limit, and everything that remains belongs entirely to the earth. Number 3. Madagascar Titanite. Modern laboratories can accomplish astonishing things. They can reproduce the chemical composition of gemstones with remarkable precision. They can grow crystals that appear exceptionally clean, control color with extraordinary accuracy, and manufacture materials so convincing that even trained professionals rely on advanced instruments to distinguish certain synthetic stones from their natural counterparts. Yet despite decades of scientific progress, one challenge continues to resist complete imitation. History. Madagascar's titanite, also known as sphene, illustrates that limitation with remarkable clarity. Although appreciated for its exceptional dispersion, often producing flashes of color that can exceed those of diamond, the finest natural titanite possesses something even more significant than brilliance. Hidden within its crystal are countless tiny records of an ancient geological journey. Minute inclusions, subtle growth zoning, microscopic stress features, and structural variations that accumulated naturally over immense spans of time. None of these characteristics was designed. None can be planned. Each exists because the crystal responded to changing temperatures, shifting pressures, migrating fluids, and chemical environments that evolved over millions of years inside the Earth's crust. Technology can reproduce a crystal. It cannot reproduce a lifetime. This distinction explains why serious collectors rarely evaluate extraordinary natural gemstones by appearance alone. They value the accumulated evidence that accompanies the crystal, evidence that developed gradually, unpredictably, and without human control. Every natural irregularity represents a decision made by the Earth itself. Every microscopic inclusion marks a moment that can never be repeated under exactly the same circumstances. That is why the conversation eventually moves beyond beauty. It moves beyond rarity. It even moves beyond craftsmanship. The discussion becomes one of authenticity preserved through time. Perhaps this is the quiet paradox at the heart of the gemstone world. The more advanced technology becomes, the more clearly it reveals the one thing it still cannot accelerate. Nature does not simply create gemstones. It allows them to become witnesses to their own history. Collectors understand that difference instinctively. They are not searching for perfection manufactured yesterday. They are searching for evidence that has survived for millions of years. And once history itself becomes the true object of desire, the final two discoveries no longer ask which gemstone looks the most extraordinary. They ask a far more revealing question. What exactly are collectors paying for when they spend millions on a single stone? Number 2. Tanzanian Alexandrite. Certificates can verify, laboratories can identify, experts can authenticate. Yet none of those things creates confidence on their own. Confidence is earned when every piece of evidence points toward the same conclusion. Few African gemstones illustrate that principle more convincingly than exceptional Alexandrite from Tanzania. Among collectors, Alexandrite has long been admired for its extraordinary ability to change color. Under daylight, fine specimens may appear bluish-green to green. Under warmer, incandescent light, those same crystals can shift toward purplish-red or raspberry tones. This remarkable optical phenomenon is caused by the crystal's unique interaction with different wavelengths of light, making Alexandrite one of the most fascinating gemstones in mineralogy. But experienced collectors rarely stop at the color change. Color can attract attention. Evidence determines confidence. Under magnification, natural Alexandrite often reveals a subtle combination of crystal inclusions, growth structures, and internal characteristics that develop gradually during its formation. These features rarely make the gemstone more visually perfect. Instead, they make its story more convincing. Each natural inclusion supports the conclusion that the crystal formed within an environment no laboratory can reproduce in exactly the same sequence over millions of years. Every microscopic feature becomes another independent witness supporting the same history. This is how certainty is built. Not from one spectacular characteristic, but from many small pieces of evidence that agree with one another. Collectors understand that remarkable gemstones are rarely purchased because of a single extraordinary feature. They are acquired because every observation, from optical behavior to internal structure, geological origin, and documented provenance, forms a consistent narrative that can withstand careful examination. Perhaps this explains why the highest levels of the gemstone market operate differently from ordinary luxury markets. Beauty may inspire desire. Certainty justifies investment. By this stage of the journey, the meaning of imperfection has almost completed its transformation. The tiny natural features, once dismissed as flaws, have become supporting evidence in a much larger story. Only one final question remains. After exploring rarity, survival, authenticity, complexity, craftsmanship, and certainty, what is the single quality that ultimately separates an extraordinary gemstone from every other beautiful object on Earth? The answer lies not in what the eye sees, but in what time itself can never create twice. Number 1. Tanzanian scapolite. There is a point in every great investigation when hundreds of separate clues stop competing with one another. Instead, they begin telling the same story. That moment has now arrived. Over the course of this journey, 15 remarkable African gemstones have challenged one belief after another. Perfect clarity proved less important than extraordinary color. Tiny inclusions became evidence instead of defects. Fractures revealed survival. Growth patterns recorded geological change. Even microscopic imperfections turned into signatures that no laboratory could write with complete authenticity. Each chapter seemed different. In reality, every chapter was leading here. Tanzanian scapolite rarely enjoys the worldwide recognition of emerald, ruby, or sapphire. It is not promoted by famous advertising campaigns, nor is it the first gemstone most people imagine when discussing extraordinary collections. Yet among mineral specialists, exceptional natural specimens possess a quiet ability to demonstrate something far more profound than popularity. Look beneath the polished surface, and the crystal begins speaking the same language heard throughout this documentary. Natural growth structures, minute inclusions, subtle internal variations. Evidence accumulated gradually rather than manufactured instantly. None of these features exists because the crystal failed to become perfect. They exist because the Earth refused to erase its own history. That realization changes everything. For generations, imperfections were judged as interruptions. Now they become records. Every inclusion marks an event. Every healed fracture marks survival. Every growth boundary marks another chapter in a geological process that unfolded over immense spans of time, never knowing that human eyes would one day search for the traces it left behind. Perhaps this explains why experienced collectors rarely describe their finest gemstones as flawless. Instead, they describe them as honest. Honest about where they formed. Honest about what they endured. Honest about the millions of years that shaped them into something no factory can reproduce, and no second chance in nature will ever repeat exactly. In the end, the greatest misconception was never about gemstones. It was about value itself. Value was never hidden inside perfection. It was hidden inside authenticity. And authenticity is simply history that survived long enough for someone to recognize it. That is why some of Africa's most extraordinary gemstones are cherished, not in spite of their so-called flaws, but because those natural signatures transform beautiful crystals into irreplaceable witnesses of Earth's story. Once that perspective changes, perfection is no longer the finish line. Understanding is. Perhaps the greatest lesson wasn't about gemstones at all. It was about understanding that true value isn't always found in perfection. It is often preserved in history. If this documentary changed the way you see gemstones, let us know in the comments. Would you choose flawless beauty or a gemstone that carries millions of years of natural history? If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more documentary stories from the fascinating world of gemstones. Until next time, keep looking a little closer, because nature's greatest treasures are rarely perfect.